Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And here we are in Calloway County with workers' compensation attorney Jeff Roberts. Jeff, how are you, guy?
I'm doing good, Jim. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well. Today we're going to talk about catastrophic work injuries and some of the benefits that come along with it and some of the things we've got to be careful of. But you've handled workers' compensation claims all throughout Western Kentucky and really all throughout Kentucky for about 32 years now.
Yes. Yeah, I've been handling workers' compensation claims since I started practicing in 1992.
And now you've got two offices. Your primary office is where we normally record these, and this is down here in Murray in Calloway County. But you've also got a new office up in Hopkinsville, up in Christian County.
Yes, I've had it up there for about a year now.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah, so I do have the Hopkinsville office where I meet with clients up there, and I like that office there. I'm in Murray more frequently. I live here in Calloway County. But anytime I have clients up there, I try to meet them at that office. It saves them on drive time, and I've got several clients. Over my career, I've had several clients up in Christian County, in the Hopkinsville area, and even all over, as you said, all over Kentucky. Several clients up in the Bowling Green area now as well, and so that just works out and makes it easier for the clients. I try to usually set several clients up at one time and meet with them all there, and it just saves them from having to drive. So.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, we're going to cover a lot of ground in this episode, but one thing I want to save to the end, because I think this is actually kind of really interesting about a catastrophic work injury, is that there's actually a benefit that's available to the spouse who may be doing some home care for an injured spouse. Maybe the guy got injured at the GM plant. Suddenly he's got some issues and he can't really get around like he used to. And they decided, hey, the wife will take care of him. There's actually a way for her to actually get compensated. So we'll dive into that at
Certainly
the end.
That potential.
Yeah. So let's talk first of all about the medical. When workers' comp is a good system. Kentucky's actually got a pretty robust workers' compensation system in terms of the benefits and getting things that covered that a lot of people don't realize it may cover. But you've got some long-term effects that come along with a catastrophic work injury. And there's also the possibility of lifetime benefits, but there's a little bit of a roadblock there you got to get through.
Correct. With medical in Kentucky, whether the injury is catastrophic or the injury is not as catastrophic, you have the same class of benefits, so to speak. When I talk to clients, initially I usually go through the types of benefits that we can recover in a workers' compensation claim. And we've discussed this. You can find it on my website. You can find it in prior episodes. But just to run through those very, very quickly is medical benefits, which we're going to talk about in a little more detail here in a second. What's called temporary total disability benefits, which is what you receive before you reach maximum medical improvement when you're off work for a work injury. Potentially vocational rehabilitation benefits, and then permanent disability benefits. It could be permanent partial disability. It could be permanent total disability. So the medical benefits for a work injury in Kentucky, for a long, long time, Kentucky medical for a work injury continued for the worker's lifetime. In 2018, the legislature changed that, and they terminated medical potentially terminated medical at 15 years. In certain situations, the medical, though, can continue lifetime. At the end of the 15 years, right now, we don't really know how that process is going to look because nobody has reached that 15-year process because the 15 years just come in 9 years ago. But the process looks as anticipated is that near the end of that 15 years, the injured worker is supposed to be notified by the Department of Workers' Claims. Your medical may be terminating soon. If you think it ought to continue, then you can file a document to have a judge award the medical for a lifetime. At that point in time, the insurance company would be able to respond to that. What that process is really going to look like, we just don't really know. But some injuries, medical will continue there. If you're totally disabled and you have certain significant injuries, medical will continue for lifetime. And we're talking about catastrophic injuries here, so sometimes you may get lifetime medical right off the bat just because of the nature.
This could be a brain injury, a head injury of some sort. This could be a spinal injury of some sort that really, there's technology and there's ways to treat with that, but these are really permanent, serious, significant, well, as you say, catastrophic injuries. So.
Right. Yeah. So you may be with a catastrophic injury, you may get the medical lifetime from the initial judge's decision or a settlement, or if you don't, then at the end of that 15-year period, you would have the option at that time to ask for the lifetime medical. And with these type of injuries, especially the catastrophic injuries, that is something that that is extremely important to make sure you lock in that the attorney locks in for the client, and that the injured worker make sure they get locked in for them as well. With these injuries, somebody can, as we're talking about catastrophic, you mentioned a brain injury. Someone could have a brain injury, significant brain injury, and then they're going to require much more care than someone else potentially from that standpoint. Person paralyzed because of an injury and they're in a wheelchair, or has an amputation and has a prosthetic. The wheelchair is going to wear out over time. The prosthetic's going to wear out over time. People who have some issues with spinal cord injuries, etc., may need special equipment, special types of chairs to help them get up. A lift chair in that regard, or special equipment in the bedroom to help them get in and out of bed. And those types of things wear out over time. And frankly, it doesn't stop at 15 years that all of a sudden you no longer need a wheelchair. That's going to be something you may need for the rest of your life unless there's some major medical advancements, which we all hope there will be. And so making sure you get that medical that's going to provide a replacement prosthetic or replacement durable medical equipment that the injured worker needs over time is something that is extremely important. Another side to that, we've talked about people who have some sort of paralysis as a result of a catastrophic work injury. There are times where the injury is so bad, if you have to be in a wheelchair or other types of injuries, where there needs to be alterations made to your home to allow you to function properly within that environment. Interior doors may need to be widened. The shower, if you only have tubs, and you may need to have a shower that doesn't have a step or a very low lip to get in to be able to use that, grab bars, etc. A variety of type of equipment that may need alterations that may need to be made to your home. And that should be covered by the workers' comp insurance carrier as well from that. And I've had times where I've had to fight over that for clients in the past. And sometimes some insurance carriers, with the nature of the injury, not have to fight quite as much there. I know one client several years ago who was paralyzed because of their work injury, and they lived in a two-story home, and we were able to get elevators because all the bedrooms are on the second floor.
Right, that makes sense.
We're able to get an elevator installed so that they could get upstairs to their bedroom, and other alterations were made to the home as well. And so those type of things come into play when you have these catastrophic injuries.
Jeff, let me come back to something, because I know we've talked about this in a previous episode, but we talked about the 15-year kind of, I call it a toll gate or whatever, where you've got to kind of reapply for the lifetime. One of the risks that you've discussed in the past is that what happens if you move? What happens if the Department of Workers' Claims maybe loses contact with you somehow, and you could actually blow past that 15-year notice because you weren't thinking about it necessarily, and you never received the notification. I mean, that could place a lot of Kentucky injured workers at risk.
Yes, that's the reason I tell clients when we resolve the claims is you need to keep the Department of Workers' Claims in Kentucky advised of any changes in your address. As you know, right now we're 9 years in to, yeah, no, not even 9 years. I was wrong a while ago. 2018 to 2024, so we're 6 years in.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's a lawyer, not a mathematician.
I'm-
That's a disclaimer.
I'm not an accountant for a reason, and so we're not into. We've not reached that 15-year period for anyone, and if a client were to reach out to me close to their 15-year period of time and say, okay, I've moved, I would let the Department of Workers' Claims know that as well, but they need to do that themselves because, frankly, at some point in time, I hope to retire.
I mean, the attorney who handled the case doesn't have that obligation.
No.
The client actually has that obligation.
The obligation is on the client because I don't know if a client moves,
Right.
And so if the client moves, they need to let the Department of Workers' Claims know that. I try to now also not only include the phone number, which is very good that now you can transfer and keep your phone number, which is going to be very helpful in these situations, but I also try to include a email address in any settlement agreements and let the Department of Workers' Claims know about the client's email address because a lot of times, even if they move, they still have the same email address, and the hope is that the Department of Workers' Claims will reach out to the claimant through all available avenues, through mail at the home address, through email, as well as phone if they don't hear back from the other means. So.
Right, that makes sense. Let's transition, as we talked about medical benefits, let's transition into the income benefits and kind of how that works.
Before we transition, one thing I didn't mention, but I think does bear mentioning, is if because of the injury, if the injury is catastrophic and the person needs changes made to their vehicle, they need hand controls. That is something that's going to be covered. So hand controls to your vehicle, and if you have to replace your vehicle over time, which you will, putting new hand controls on the new vehicle would come into play. If you need a wheelchair accessible van, for instance, because of the injury, then that's something that is covered and should be covered by the workers' compensation carrier.
And I think aspects of workers' comp, such as exactly what you just mentioned, are things that people aren't even thinking about.
Right.
They may be worried about them or panicked about them, but actually a good attorney is going to work that into the settlement, and they're legitimate. They're related to the injury. They should be covered.
Exactly. And, I've had clients that had these catastrophic injuries, sadly, and when I talked to them, they never thought anything about okay, my vehicle, the insurance, as part of the medical benefits, they're going to pay to put hand controls on my vehicle. They're going to pay to put a ramp into my home and make alterations to my home for this, or wheelchair accessible vans. And so, they've been going through a lot of things that they shouldn't have had to go through until they come in to see me. And I say, look, let's get this better for you. And sometimes you may have to have, sometimes it's obvious if a person requires a wheelchair because they're paralyzed from the injury. The fact that they need wider doorways in their home is kind of an obvious thing. Insurance companies don't tend to say, okay, we need a doctor to say these doorways need to be wider. Sometimes you'll get somebody to go into the home. That is basically their job is to go in and look and see what can we do, what do we need to do to this home to make it more accessible for you, more useful for you, and to make it, to improve your quality of life. I've used those as experts to get things approved from judges. I've had insurance companies say, okay, let's send this person in and do that so we can make all the changes to the home at one time, because it's a lot easier to do it at one time instead of piecemeal. And so it depends on the insurance company. Some are much better about that than others are from there. And so that is, but a lot of times clients and their families don't even think about that because they got so much more on
Yeah,
their plate at that point.
Literally,
in time.
the roof just caved in on them, and they're worried about other things. And these are the things that, again, having done this for 32 years, you're already thinking down the road because you've done this so many times that you're like, okay, well, wait a minute now. There's a few other things we're going to have to do here.
Right.
But the nice thing is you kind of walk them through that process. You take the time to explain it to them, and then you go fight to make sure they get it, which is terrific. I mean, I just again, anybody that's been in this type of situation, you need a good attorney. You absolutely got to have a good attorney. This is there's too much on the line at this point.
True.
So let's go ahead and transition then to the income benefits. So let's kind of what all is available at this point.
Well, usually with a catastrophic injury, you're looking at total disability, and Kentucky, for workers' comp purposes now, permanent total disability would continue until the worker turns age 70, but a minimum of 4 years. So if you become totally disabled at age 67 from an injury, you're going to get benefits for 4 years, not just till age 70. But most of the time, you're looking at age 70 is going to be longer than 4 years for most injured workers out there from catastrophic injuries. And so you're looking at getting that. The biggest key is, and if you have a catastrophic injury, there are times, if you're paralyzed from the injury or if you got a significant brain injury, the insurance company realizes, okay, this person is not going back to work anytime soon anyway, and they may settle on a total disability, permanent total disability with the worker. The biggest thing, though, that I see that's done wrong with people who don't have an attorney in those settings is they don't coordinate. We've talked about before that I do not only workers' comp, I do Social Security disability. If you have a catastrophic injury, then the person should be filing for and hopefully receiving Social Security disability benefits as well. And the Social Security Administration will potentially offset what you receive in Social Security disability benefits by what you receive in workers' compensation benefits. But if you word your settlement agreement correctly, you can limit that offset and actually end up putting more money in the injured worker's pocket than what they would otherwise just with a normal permanent total disability settlement that doesn't take into account that workers' comp offset.
And again, you've talked about this before. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Social Security disability side of Just Practice, in the previous episode 84, we did talk about Social Security disability, and in the show notes there, that's all the information right below the little player bar. There are some additional links to previous episodes that can kind of guide you through that. But when you're talking about the Social Security, you also, because you're handling the comp and potentially the Social Security disability claim as well, you're coordinating. I mean, you kind of know what's going on. The risk is when somebody has an attorney who's doing just one side of the situation, you have another attorney who's handling maybe the comp side, and they don't coordinate because they may not even be aware of it.
Right.
Then you can get into some problems. But you've talked about that in previous issues as well.
Yes, and that can be a problem if you're not if the attorneys aren't coordinating. And I've had clients before where I'd be representing them in one case, and I'll be talking with them, and they talk about, well, this other attorney's handling this other case for me, and they wanted to know if they could get the medical records from you. And I'm thinking, first I've heard about this other
When did
person.
that happen? Yeah.
Yeah, and which is fine if they do that, but they need to let both attorneys know so that the attorneys can coordinate, because not coordinating can the person who's going to suffer the effects of the attorneys not coordinating on cases that have overlap, like Social Security disability and workers' compensation. The person who's going to suffer is going to be the injured worker. It does not affect my attorney fee in a workers' compensation case. In fact, actually coordinating the benefits at times could end up causing me to recover a little bit less, but it also benefits the client more, so which is better. And the same on the Social Security, that attorney doesn't lose any money because they didn't coordinate with the workers' comp case. It's the client who suffers, and so you need to make sure if you have different attorneys handling different cases, you need to make sure they are aware, each attorney is aware of that so that they can work together.
And commonly, I've heard this referred to in the past. This is called the Social Security wraparound or the Social Security set aside. Is that kind of what we're dealing with, where there's an offset here?
Wraparound, not set aside.
Okay.
Set aside comes with the medical side, which we can talk about a little bit in a minute if we have time. But yeah, it's called frequently referred to by attorneys talking among themselves as a Social Security wraparound. So basically, you're taking the workers' comp benefits and coordinating it and kind of wrapping it around the Social Security benefits, so to speak, to make sure the Social Security benefits aren't affected and that the workers' comp benefits are, instead of the offset costing the injured worker monies, you work it around to where there's as little offset as possible.
So it maximizes both sides.
Maximizing both sides, yes.
Perfect,
Absolutely.
Jeff, are there other income benefits we need to talk about? I know generally when we're talking about comp, there's total temporary disability, the TTD, while they're being treated. I think you alluded to that at the very beginning of this episode. Do you want to talk about that just briefly?
Yeah, temporary total disability benefits is what you receive when you're off work under doctor's orders. Those those are what's paid to you after the initial injury, and that's paid out usually with a catastrophic injury. The insurance company will voluntarily start paying those benefits to the worker, because most of the time with a catastrophic injury, there's not a question of whether the person suffered a work-related injury or not. And I've had some insurance carriers fight. A gentleman who, road construction worker that, a bridge worker who fell and sadly suffered amputation of both legs below the knee, and the insurance company drug it out even though he was in the hospital, and it's clear that he had to suffer a work-related injury until we got involved and made a phone call, and they said, and they started paying shortly after the phone call to let them know we were involved in the case. But that's rare that happens on catastrophic.
On catastrophic
It's not rare on others, but it's rare on catastrophic injury cases from that standpoint. So the worker would get those benefits either until they reach a level of improvement that will allow them to return back to employment, which in catastrophic injury cases doesn't always occur, or until they reach maximum medical improvement. So when they reach maximum medical improvement, that workers' comp check is going to stop there. That's basically to pay the lost wages that the workers receiving. It should be 66 2/3 of the average weekly wage, subject to a cap under Kentucky law. And that's another reason why you need an attorney in these cases, is that check's going to stop at some point in time, and it may be 6 months, it may be a year or longer before the permanent disability side of the case is resolved. Because when you're talking about permanent total disability, that's the most insurance company's ever going to have to pay, and they don't always want to settle for that. So you've got to really document the client's disability to get that, or go to a judge's decision if they never want to pay what they should be paying. In having an attorney involved earlier before that benefit cuts off, I've had clients before when they first come in, and I say, I know from the injury that it's very unlikely they're going to return to work, and I say, go file for Social Security disability. Let's get you on Social Security disability, even though there is going to be that offset potentially because of the temporary total disability that we really can't do anything about on that, because there's no way to structure that. When that workers' comp check stops, the temporary total disability stops. If the worker's on Social Security disability, it's get a letter from the carrier saying the benefits have stopped, notifying Social Security, and then their Social Security benefits goes up to its full amount, and they still have income coming in to be able to pay their bills. If they don't know to do that, and they wait till the income benefits stop, the temporary total disability benefits stop, and then they go file for Social Security disability, it's months down the road before they ever start receiving that.
Yeah, the one thing the government doesn't do well is work quickly.
Correct.
So, yeah, it does take a while. By the way, friends, if you want to go back and look at or listen to episode 77, we talked about how workers' compensation benefits are calculated. Jeff gets into the calculations for TTD payments, and talks about that. By the way, if you had a secondary job that your employer was aware of, that comes into the calculation as well. So A lot of interesting information in episode 77. Jeff, anything else in the income benefits side of it? We're about at the end of this episode, but there's a lot to talk about.
No, I think we've covered the income benefits other to the injured worker. Now, as you mentioned earlier at the very start, there is at least a potential. In every case, the facts are different. Every case depends on its own facts from that. But it's actually considered part of the medical benefits. But a spouse can be paid, or family member who is providing medical care, at home medical care for the catastrophically injured worker, can potentially receive benefits or income paid to them for the medical care they're providing. So, if you've got somebody who, after an injury is bedridden for a period of time, but they're able to come home, and the spouse is the one who's taking care of them, bathing them, changing their medicines, maybe giving them infusion treatments. I've had that occur. Providing things that normally a home health aide or a home health nurse would have to come in and do, that the insurance company would have to pay for them to come in to do. Then those type of things performed by the family member or the spouse, the family member that's doing that can and should be getting reimbursed for that, or getting paid income for what they're doing in that situation.
Which is kind of interesting. And I know some people think, well, hey, that sounds like another check that we could cash. It's a lot of work.
Yes.
And my dad was in a wheelchair, so I have a little bit of familiarity with this. There's also a lot of risk to the individual if the skin's not cared for properly, if they're not turned properly. A lot of different things can happen. You might want to sit down and have a serious conversation with your healthcare providers as far as what is the best route of care. Sometimes the spouse could do it, but in some cases, you're actually probably causing some problems that you might want to avoid.
Yeah, it obviously depends on the situation,
depends on the situation.
all the time from that standpoint. And so, I've had certain situations where the insurance company wanted to balk on paying the spouse because they were doing things at home that the doctor said, yes, the spouse can do this and they can go home and be there. But the spouse has to be trained and was trained on how to do change the IVs, etc. Out and do that. And one not too long ago, where the insurance company, when I brought up paying the spouse for this, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. This is things that a spouse should do for their spouse, and they shouldn't get compensated. She'd do it if it wasn't a work injury, which is probably true. But we were able to convince them, because we went to the doctor and said, well, give us a letter that if the spouse doesn't do this at home, then the person's going to have to go to a rehab facility or back to the hospital to do this. And we sent that in and said, you can pay the spouse, or you can pay a rehab facility. It's going to charge you a whole lot more to do this. And that finally they found a way to pay the spouse. So there's ways that, but you are 100% correct. There's certain treatment that should be done by a highly trained professional, and not by a spouse there. In those, if that's the case, then they need that home health person coming in to do those.
I love referring to previous episodes, and I want to do it one more time. And if you're listening to this, please bear with me. But in episode 68, that episode covered two different things. One was the workers' compensation designated physicians form, and that's what the title is. But also contained in that episode is information about the mileage reimbursement and the other reimbursement areas that, again, workers' compensation allows here in Kentucky. So if you were to have to take somebody back for some checkups or some ongoing therapies and different things like that, remember, you can get reimbursed for that. And a lot of people probably don't realize that.
That's true. Very few insurance companies let the injured workers know that. But yes,
Imagine that.
Yeah. You can get reimbursed your mileage for medical treatment that you incur there. And one key factor to that is the mileage for medical treatment needs to be submitted within 60 days of that medical treatment, of that mileage being incurred. So you got to make sure you continue submit those in a timely fashion and use the form that we talk about in there, which is the Form 114 that you can get from the Department of Workers Claims website if you don't have one. From there, if I represent you, you would have one of those or a couple of those provided to you to start with, and we can provide additional if you don't have a way to copy them once you run low. So.
That's fantastic. And I believe, I'm just going through the episode now, I believe that we do have a link in there for the 114. If not, I'll make sure it gets in there. But again, another reason why these podcasts are so helpful, I think, and at least in my opinion, is because we break it down, we make it easy, we provide resources. And Jeff, you do a great job of really kind of helping people think through these complicated situations. Like you said, they may be thinking of what just happened shortly after the injury, whereas you're kind of looking at the long version here going, well, wait a minute, this is going to come into play, that's going to come into play, and we need to have a plan. And when there's a plan, sometimes the stress comes down a little bit because you actually kind of know where you're heading. And that's great advice.
Well, and I appreciate that. And the other side to that too, or along with that is, if you have the long-term plan in place or you have that plan that you're going to follow, then 4 months down the road, it's a lot easier for the injured worker than just waiting until something occurs and not planning for it and not dealing with it. Like I talked about with the temporary total disability benefits stopping, letting clients know file Social Security disability so that you can get on that. If you don't have that plan in place and start that process and you wait till the check ends before you start that process, it causes a lot of stress and causes a lot of difficulties for the injured worker and their families that never should have occurred.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Jeff, if somebody's listening to this and either they or their family members suffered a catastrophic work injury, how do they get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is by phone. My phone is 270-753-0053. I also have an 800 number, 1-800-844-5108 if you wish to use that. Well, I have two offices, one in Murray and one in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. The phone number is the same, so you just call that one number and you'll reach my office. From that's the best way to reach me. There, if you wish to email me, the email is jeff@jeffrobertslaw.com, but phone's the best way.
Exactly. And, as a last resort, you've always got the website, jeffrobertslaw.com. There is a contact us form on there as well. You can fill that out, and Jeff and his team will get right back to you, and we'll make that happen. Jeff, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy, but this is a serious issue because a few episodes ago we talked about some of the most dangerous jobs in Kentucky, and unfortunately, some of those result in catastrophic injuries. So here's another way for you to add some value here by providing this information and helping people with some resources.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you to the listeners.
We'll see you back in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.